She built a billion-dollar empire from scratch, but to her husband, her worth was reduced to a single, devastating medical diagnosis: barren. He walked out, chasing a legacy she couldn't give him. But the universe has a funny way of balancing the scales, especially when 5 motherless children enter the picture. Arabella Strider, the 34-year-old CEO of Vanguard Innovations, was a woman who bent reality to her will. She had revolutionized the green tech industry, took her company public before her 30th birthday, and commanded boardrooms with a terrifying, icy precision. She owned a triplex penthouse overlooking Central Park, a sprawling estate in the Hamptons, and a private jet. But all the wealth in the world could not buy the one thing she desperately wanted: a child. The sterile scent of rubbing alcohol and bleached paper in Dr. Harrison's Upper East Side clinic was permanently etched into Arabella's memory. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the final blow was delivered. "I'm so sorry, Arabella." "Raymond," Dr. Harrison said, his voice dropping to that practiced, sympathetic register doctors use when the road has run out. "The 4th round of IVF has failed. Given the progression of the scarring, the chances of carrying a child to term are essentially 0. Medically speaking, you are completely barren." Arabella felt the air leave her lungs. She reached out, her trembling hand seeking her husband's fingers. Raymond Blakely, a handsome, blue-blooded investment banker whose family traced their lineage back to the Mayflower, did not take her hand. Instead, he stood up. He smoothed the lapels of his Tom Ford suit, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on the clinic door. "Thank you, Doctor," Raymond said, his voice entirely devoid of emotion. He didn't look at his wife. "We need to go." The ride back to the penthouse in the back of their chauffeur-driven Maybach was deafeningly silent. Arabella stared out the tinted windows at the blur of Manhattan, waiting for Raymond to pull her into his arms, to tell her that it didn't matter, that they had each other, that they could adopt. Instead, the moment the private elevator doors opened into their foyer, Raymond turned to her. There was no warmth left in his eyes, only the cold, calculating look of a man cutting a bad investment from his portfolio. "I'm filing for divorce," he stated flatly. Arabella froze, her Prada coat slipping from her shoulders to the imported Italian marble floor. "Raymond, what are you talking about? We can adopt. We can use a surrogate. I don't want a surrogate, Arabella, and I certainly don't want someone else's discarded problem through adoption," he interrupted, his tone laced with cruelty. "I am the last male of the Blakely line. I need a bloodline. I need a biological heir. I'm 36 years old, and I have wasted 7 years waiting for you to do the one basic biological function a woman is supposed to do. I need a legacy, not another corporate merger." The words struck her like physical blows, but the true devastation, the twist that would completely shatter her reality, was delivered 2 days later. Not by Raymond, but by the relentless flashing cameras of the paparazzi. Page 6 dropped the bombshell on a Thursday morning. Photos of Raymond vacationing in St. Bart's, his arm wrapped affectionately around a pregnant woman. Arabella stared at her tablet in her corner office, her blood running cold. The woman wasn't a stranger. It was Vanessa Harrington, a 25-year-old junior executive from Arabella's own public relations department. Raymond hadn't just left her because she was barren. He had left her because he had already successfully bred his legacy with her subordinate. Vanessa was 6 months pregnant. The affair had been going on under Arabella's nose in her own company headquarters. The betrayal unlocked a dormant, ruthless survival instinct inside Arabella. She didn't cry. She went to war. Within 48 hours, Vanessa was terminated under an ironclad morals clause, cleverly buried in her employment contract, losing all her unvested stock options. Arabella's team of elite lawyers absolutely eviscerated Raymond in the divorce settlement, enforcing the prenuptial agreement to the letter. Raymond got his freedom, but he didn't get a single dime of the Vanguard Innovations empire. But victory in the boardroom did not translate to peace at home. When the dust settled, Arabella was left utterly alone. The triplex penthouse, with its 10-foot ceilings and priceless modern art, felt like a multi-million-dollar tomb. She spent her nights staring at the empty nursery she had optimistically decorated 2 years ago, a room filled with imported Swedish cribs and hand-painted murals that would never hear the sound of a child's laughter. She threw herself entirely into her work, becoming colder, stricter, and more isolated. She was the billionaire ice queen of Wall Street, untouchable and utterly broken inside. She believed her heart was a closed chapter, permanently sealed away, until the day she decided to build a park. 18 months after the divorce, Arabella sought a distraction. Vanguard Innovations was sponsoring a massive philanthropic project, a 50-acre eco-friendly community center and botanical garden in a lower-income district of upstate New York. It was a hands-on project, and Arabella demanded perfection. That was how she met Nathaniel Wells. Nate was the lead landscape architect contracted for the project. At 38, he looked like a man who carried the weight of the world on his shoulders, yet somehow managed to keep his back straight. He had broad shoulders, calloused hands, and tired, kind hazel eyes. Arabella knew his file: highly talented, under-resourced, and a widower. His wife had died of a sudden brain aneurysm 3 years prior. It was a sweltering Saturday morning when Arabella arrived at the construction site for a surprise inspection. She stepped out of her SUV in a tailored cream pantsuit and a hard hat, expecting to see a disciplined crew laying the foundation for the greenhouse. Instead, she walked into absolute chaos. A worn-out, rusted Volvo station wagon was parked near the cement mixers. Sitting on a stack of lumber was a sullen, 14-year-old boy glued to his phone. Nearby, a 12-year-old girl was trying to stop 8-year-old twin girls from burying each other in a pile of landscaping sand, and running directly toward Arabella's spotless designer heels was a tiny, sticky, 4-year-old boy wielding a half-eaten popsicle. "Oliver, no, stop!" A panicked male voice echoed across the site. Nate sprinted out from behind a bulldozer, covered in dirt and sweat, looking absolutely horrified. But he was too late. Little Oliver tripped over a stray root and face-planted squarely onto the toes of Arabella's $1,200 shoes, dropping his cherry popsicle across her cream trousers. The entire construction site went dead silent. The teenager looked up from his phone. The twins stopped throwing sand. Nate froze in his tracks, his face pale. Everyone knew Arabella Strider's reputation. She fired executives for typos. Oliver let out a wail, his little hands clutching his scraped knee. Arabella stared down at the crying child, the sticky red mess on her pants and the dirt on her shoes. For a fraction of a second, the billionaire ice queen took over. But then, she looked into Oliver's terrified, tear-filled eyes, and something inside the impenetrable fortress of her chest cracked. To the absolute astonishment of everyone, especially her security detail, Arabella dropped to her knees right in the dirt. Hey, it's okay," she whispered, her voice surprisingly soft. She ignored the ruined silk of her suit and gently lifted the little boy. "Let me see that knee, tough guy." Nate rushed forward, breathless. "Ms. Strider, I am so incredibly sorry. My babysitter quit this morning via text, and it's a Saturday, and I couldn't afford to lose the day's pay, so I had to bring them. I'll pay for the dry cleaning. I'll pack up my tools. You don't have to fire me. I'll just leave." Arabella looked up at Nate. She saw the sheer exhaustion in his face, the quiet desperation of a single father, just trying to keep his head above water. She looked at the 4 other children, watching him with anxious eyes, terrified their dad was in trouble. "Nobody is getting fired, Mr. Wells," Arabella said, standing up and balancing Oliver on her hip as if she had done it 1,000,000 times. "But this is an active construction site. It isn't safe." She turned to her imposing head of security. "Call an air-conditioned luxury trailer to be delivered here immediately. Stock it with snacks, an iPad, and hire a licensed childcare professional to be on site every weekend until this project is done." Nate's jaw dropped. "Ms. Strider, I can't let you do that. I can't afford— It's a corporate expense, Nathaniel," she interrupted, a faint ghost of a smile touching her lips. "Consider it an investment in my lead architect's peace of mind. Now, where is your first aid kit for this knee?" That day changed everything. Arabella found herself finding excuses to visit the site. She learned their names. Liam, the brooding 14-year-old who secretly loved architecture. Maya, the 12-year-old who tried too hard to be the mother figure. The mischievous 8-year-old twins, Chloe and Sophie. And Oliver, who decided Arabella was his new favorite person and greeted her every visit by demanding to be picked up. For the first time in her life, Arabella didn't care about the dirt on her clothes or the disruption to her schedule. She found herself sitting in the luxury trailer, helping Liam with his math homework, while Nate reviewed blueprints. She watched Nate parent, patient, fiercely loving, and incredibly gentle. He was the antithesis of Raymond. Where Raymond demanded perfection and legacy, Nate just demanded kindness. 2 months into the project, the dynamic shifted from professional to personal. A massive thunderstorm washed out the site one evening, stranding everyone. Arabella insisted on having her driver take Nate and the kids home, trailing behind his broken-down Volvo. When they arrived at Nate's small, cramped, 3-bedroom rental in the suburbs, Maya timidly looked up at Arabella. "Ms. Strider, Dad was going to make spaghetti. Do you want to stay?" "It's not fancy," Nate quickly interjected, his cheeks flushing. "Maya, don't bother Ms. Strider. She has places to be." "I'd love to stay," Arabella said, stepping over a pile of sneakers in the narrow hallway. Dinner was a revelation. It was loud, chaotic, and messy. Chloe spilled her milk, Liam argued with Maya about the TV remote, and Oliver insisted on sitting on Arabella's lap while she tried to eat cheap boxed pasta. Arabella looked around the scuffed dining table. There was no imported marble, no Michelin star chef, no silent, suffocating tension. There was just life. Real, vibrant, messy life. She caught Nate watching her from across the table. His eyes held a mixture of awe and deep, undeniable affection. For a moment, the noise of the children faded into the background. The connection between them was electric, heavy with unspoken longing. When Arabella finally left that night, she sat in the back of her silent, luxurious Maybach and broke down. She cried not out of sadness, but out of a terrifying, overwhelming realization. She was a billionaire, yet sitting at that cramped, sticky table, she had never felt richer. But a fairy tale is never without its dragons. The next morning, Arabella arrived at her corporate office to find an emergency board meeting called. Standing at the head of her boardroom, wearing a smug, triumphant smile, was Raymond. Beside him stood lawyers representing a massive, hostile private equity firm that had just acquired the debt on the very land the community center was being built on. More importantly, Arabella's assistant handed her a confidential file. Raymond hadn't just bought the project's debt to stall her out of spite. He had dug into her new life. Nate was drowning in $500,000 of medical debt from his late wife's hospital bills. His small house was quietly in foreclosure, and Raymond's new equity firm had just purchased the banknote. "Hello, Arabella," Raymond sneered, his eyes gleaming with malice. "I hear you've taken up playing house with the hired help. It would be a shame if your new little boyfriend and his 5 brats ended up homeless before Christmas." Arabella felt the temperature in the room plummet. Raymond had severely underestimated her. He thought he was dealing with the broken, barren wife he had discarded. He didn't realize he had just threatened the family of a fiercely protective mother who happened to have $1 billion at her disposal. The war was on. The temperature in the Vanguard Innovations boardroom seemed to drop 10 degrees. Raymond stood at the head of the mahogany table, flanked by 2 corporate sharks in bespoke suits, practically vibrating with smug satisfaction. He had anticipated tears. He had anticipated panic. He expected Arabella to beg. Instead, Arabella slowly sat down in her leather chair, steepled her fingers, and looked at her ex-husband with the terrifying, dead-eyed calm of an apex predator. "You bought the debt on a charitable community center and a grieving widower's home," Arabella stated, her voice dangerously level. "Is this what the great Blakely legacy has been reduced to, Raymond? Petty extortion?" "It's just business, Arabella," Raymond sneered, pacing the length of the room. "The site is prime real estate. My firm intends to bulldoze your little pet project and build luxury condos. And as for Mr. Wells, well, debt collection is a harsh reality. Perhaps he shouldn't have taken on 5 children he couldn't afford. It's a shame they'll be out on the street. But that's the free market." Arabella didn't blink. She pressed a button on the intercom embedded in the table. "Sarah, please send in Mr. Strider and the legal team." The heavy oak doors swung open. It wasn't just her lawyers who walked in. It was the formidable head of her acquisitions department. They dropped a stack of thick, bound dossiers onto the table, sliding one directly in front of Raymond. "What is this?" Raymond snapped, his confidence faltering for a fraction of a second. "That, Raymond, is the consequence of underestimating me," Arabella said smoothly, rising to her feet. "While you were busy digging into my personal life, I had my analytics team look into your new private equity firm. You've heavily overleveraged your assets to buy up distressed debt, including Nathaniel's. In fact, you used your own Vanguard stock, the stock you retained in our divorce, as collateral." Raymond's face paled. "You can't touch that." "I don't have to," Arabella replied, her voice echoing in the silent room. "Yesterday afternoon, I initiated a hostile takeover of your primary creditor. Vanguard Innovations now owns the bank that holds your firm's loans. I am effectively your boss, Raymond, and I am calling in your debts, all of them, effective immediately." The color drained entirely from Raymond's face. The 2 lawyers beside him suddenly looked very uncomfortable, realizing they had backed the wrong horse in a billionaire's blood feud. "You're bluffing," Raymond choked out. "You wouldn't risk SEC scrutiny over a contractor." "He is not just a contractor," Arabella said, her voice dropping to a fierce, protective whisper. "And you have 24 hours to transfer the deeds for the community center and Nathaniel Wells's mortgage directly to my personal holding company, or I will liquidate your firm, freeze your assets, and leave you with nothing but that precious legacy you value so much. Get out of my building." Raymond retreated, humiliated and utterly defeated. Arabella had won the battle, but she knew the war for Nate's heart was going to be far more delicate. She couldn't simply tell Nate she had bought his house. A man with his immense pride, already struggling with the sheer weight of providing for 5 children, would feel completely emasculated. So, she did it quietly. She set up a blind trust that paid off his late wife's medical bills and cleared the mortgage, framing it as an anonymous philanthropic grant for single parents in the construction industry. For a few weeks, life was idyllic. The burden of debt lifted from Nate's shoulders, and the transformation was miraculous. He laughed more. The dark circles under his eyes faded. He and Arabella started officially dating. She traded her Michelin-starred dinners for Friday night pizza and chaotic movie nights on Nate's worn-out sofa. She taught Liam how to negotiate for a used car, took Maya and the twins shopping for school clothes, and spent hours reading bedtime stories to Oliver. But Raymond, cornered and facing financial ruin, was not finished. Driven by sheer, vindictive malice, he decided that if he couldn't break Arabella financially, he would break her emotionally. It happened on a rainy Tuesday evening. Arabella was at Nate's house, helping Chloe and Sophie build a baking soda volcano for a science fair, when a sharp, authoritative knock echoed through the front door. Nate opened it to find two stern-faced individuals holding clipboards, flanked by a local police officer. "Mr. Nathaniel Wells?" the woman in the front asked. "I am Miss Higgins with Child Protective Services. We received an anonymous, urgent tip regarding the welfare of the 5 minors in this residence. The report alleges severe neglect, an unsafe living environment, and the presence of an unstable, unfit adult female." Nate froze, the blood rushing in his ears. "What? No, that's insane. Who called you?" "We cannot disclose that, sir, but we need to inspect the premises and interview the children immediately. If we find the conditions as reported, we are authorized to place the children in emergency foster care tonight." A collective gasp echoed from the hallway. Maya covered her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. Liam stepped protectively in front of his younger siblings. Nate looked completely paralyzed by the sudden nightmare unfolding in his living room. Arabella stepped out of the kitchen, wiping flour from her hands. The billionaire ice queen had returned, but this time she was a mother bear defending her cubs. "Ms. Higgins, is it?" Arabella asked, stepping between Nate and the social workers. Her voice was pure steel. "My name is Arabella Strider. I am the CEO of Vanguard Innovations, and I am the unstable adult female mentioned in your baseless report." The social worker blinked, recognizing the name immediately. "Ms. Strider, this is standard procedure." "Standard procedure requires credible evidence," Arabella cut her off smoothly. "You are standing in a home with fully stocked refrigerators, a dedicated tutoring schedule, and 5 children who are deeply loved. You are also standing in a home legally represented by the top family law firm in the state of New York, whom I currently have on speed dial." Arabella pulled out her phone, dialing her lead attorney. Within 10 minutes, she had her lawyers on speakerphone, systematically dismantling the CPS report. She provided immediate, digital proof of the children's pediatric records, school attendance, and even the anonymous grant that had secured their housing. Defeated and legally outgunned, the social workers retreated into the rain, apologizing for the intrusion. The door clicked shut. The house was dead silent. Arabella turned around, expecting relief. Instead, she saw Nate staring at her, his expression unreadable. He looked at the paperwork she had left on the table, the documents proving his mortgage was paid, documents her lawyers had accidentally referenced during the call. "You bought my house?" Nate asked, his voice cracking. "The anonymous grant. That was you." Arabella swallowed hard. "Nate, I just wanted to help. I saw you drowning, and I had the resources. I am not one of your acquisitions, Arabella," Nate exploded, the stress and humiliation finally boiling over. He ran a hand through his hair, stepping away from her. "I'm a man trying to raise my kids. I can't compete with this. I can't just have some billionaire swoop in, buy my debts, and write off the government for me. What does that make me? Your charity case? It makes you my partner, Arabella pleaded, stepping forward. I love you, Nate. I love the kids. We are from two completely different worlds, Nate said, shaking his head, tears of frustration in his eyes. You fix things with checkbooks and hostile takeovers. I fix things with my hands. I lost my wife, Arabella. I can't lose my pride, too. I need you to leave. The words felt like a physical blow. Arabella looked past him to the children who were watching with wide, heartbroken eyes. Little Oliver reached out a hand, but Liam pulled him back. With a shattered heart, Arabella picked up her coat and walked out into the pouring rain. For 3 agonizing weeks, Arabella's world went dark. She returned to her penthouse, the silence of the massive rooms suffocating her. She threw herself into her company, finalizing the liquidation of Raymond's firm. Raymond's downfall was absolute. When his young wife, Vanessa, realized that Raymond had squandered his fortune in a petty war of vengeance and that the private jets and shopping sprees were over, she filed for divorce, taking what little liquid cash he had left. Raymond ended up exactly where he belonged, alone and ruined. But the victory tasted like ashes in Arabella's mouth. She had won the corporate war, but she had lost the only thing that actually mattered. The nursery in her penthouse was still empty, but now her heart was too. It was a Thursday afternoon when her executive assistant buzzed her intercom, sounding utterly bewildered. Ms. Strider, there is a young man here to see you. He bypassed lobby security by walking in with the catering crew. He says his name is Liam. Arabella shot up from her desk so fast her chair tipped over. Send him in. Right now. The heavy office doors opened, and 14-year-old Liam stood there, wearing a damp hoodie and a backpack, looking incredibly small in the massive glass-walled office. Arabella rushed over, dropping to her knees to be at eye level with him. Liam? Honey, what are you doing here? Did you take the train by yourself? Is your dad okay? Are the kids? Dad is an idiot, Liam interrupted bluntly, though his voice wavered. He dropped his backpack onto the plush carpet. He walks around like a zombie. He burned dinner 3 times this week. Maya is crying all the time. The twins won't play outside. And Oliver just sits by the door, waiting for your car. Arabella felt a tear slip down her cheek. Liam, your dad asked me for space. I hurt his pride. You built this whole building, right? Liam asked, looking around the towering skyscrapers visible through the windows. You're supposed to be this super smart CEO. But you can't figure out how to fix this? He doesn't care about the money, Arabella. He cares that he can't protect us the way you can. He feels useless. You just have to tell him he's not. Out of the mouths of babes. Arabella stared at the teenager, realizing how blind she had been. Nate didn't need a savior. He needed vulnerability. He needed to know that she needed him just as desperately as he needed her. Liam, Arabella said, standing up with a newfound fire in her eyes. Call my driver. We are going home. An hour later, Arabella's Maybach pulled up to the chaotic, wonderful, messy house in the suburbs. She didn't knock. She walked right through the front door. Nate was in the living room, trying to untangle a massive knot of extension cords, looking utterly exhausted. He looked up, freezing when he saw Arabella standing in the doorway, the kids slowly filing in behind her. Arabella? What are you? Shut up and listen to me, Nathaniel Wells, Arabella commanded, her voice thick with emotion, dropping her designer bag to the floor. She walked right up to him. My ex-husband didn't just leave me, she started, her voice breaking, deciding in that moment to lay all her cards on the table, stripping away the armor she had worn for years. He left me because, after 4 rounds of IVF, doctors told me my body was scarred. They told me I was entirely, medically barren. He left me because I couldn't give him a biological legacy. I spent 2 years believing I was broken merchandise, a failure as a woman, utterly unlovable. Nate's eyes widened, the frustration melting into deep, profound empathy. He dropped the cords, stepping toward her. "I didn't pay off your house to buy you," Arabella sobbed, the tears finally flowing freely. "I did it because I was terrified of losing you. I look at you, Nate, and I see the strongest, bravest man I have ever met. You hold this family together with pure love. You think I saved you? Nate, you and these kids saved me. You gave me the one thing all my billions could never, ever buy. A family. I am completely empty without you." Nate stared at her, seeing past the billionaire CEO, past the tailored suits, straight into the vulnerable, aching heart of the woman he loved. "You were never broken, Arabella," Nate whispered fiercely, closing the distance and pulling her into a desperate, crushing embrace. "You just hadn't found us yet." As he kissed her, a cheer erupted from the hallway. Oliver ran forward, tackling them both around the knees, followed closely by the twins, Maya, and a grinning Liam. They collapsed into a tangled, laughing, crying heap on the living room floor. It was chaotic. It was loud. It was perfect. 6 months later, the Vanguard Community Center and Botanical Gardens officially opened. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was attended by the press, the mayor, and hundreds of local residents. But the real story wasn't the park. Standing on the podium, holding a squirming Oliver on her hip, was Arabella Strider Wells. Beside her stood Nate, holding her hand, looking at his wife with a love so profound it practically radiated. Standing around them were Liam, Maya, Chloe, and Sophie. The billionaire who had been thrown away for being barren hadn't just rebuilt her life. She had built a legacy far greater than bloodlines or bank accounts. She had built a home. As the cameras flashed, catching the brilliant, genuine smile on Arabella's face, she looked down at the 5 children surrounding her. She wasn't just a CEO anymore. She was a mother. And for the first time in her life, Arabella knew exactly what it meant to have it all. Did Arabella's journey from a rejected wife to a fiercely loved mother of 5 touch your heart? True wealth isn't found in a bank account, but in the people who choose us. If you loved this story of resilience and redemption, please hit that like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring real-life drama. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.